Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special session on the Global Peace Offensive at World Academy Conference at 65. This special session should start probably with a quote from Albert Einstein, who once said, "I'm not a pacifist. I'm ready to fight for peace." This would be enough to explain why we are promoting a peace offensive and its strategic posture. The world we know is in turmoil. Devastating consequences of armed conflicts for human life. Species on Earth, resources, social and environmental degradation impose a change, a fundamental shift of culture towards prevention, tension reduction, problem solving at the early stages to resolve disputes peacefully. New negotiation models are required as the already crowded field mediations and negotiations expands with new actors. Our model is the peace offensive. That is a proactive, dialogue-driven peace-building strategy. Its vision and call for action were adopted last fall by the World Academy of Art and Science and the European Academy of Science and Art, the two largest academic networks. Then the Club of Rome adopted it, and many more organizations are following suit. But this radical innovation in policy embraces also individuals concerned with human security, and it's based on a greater awareness of existential threats. Military rearmament or a new arms race is not the answer for human security. We need instead an arms race in reverse, a counteroffensive for peace. In fact, our goal is reversal of the growing tensions, of the arms race spiral and the revamping of international cooperation, as it was predicated, enshrined in the United Nations Charter. The core principles of the peace offensive, according to its new strategic vision and framework, are as follows. A focus on localized initiatives for de-escalation, with issue-specific solutions rather than grand schemes, anchored among local communities. Second, partnership development building, a network of institutional partners with a shared purpose that includes academia, grassroots organizations, civil society, the media, and committed individuals across the arts. And third, iterative dialogue processes through cultural, scientific, educational diplomacy with documented experiences. You will see that a diagnostic tools for research, referral, and documentation, and a mechanism for situational analysis and reporting has already been developed. It has to be tested. Documented situation reports for promising tension reduction experiences will be produced. The approach we are taking is not necessarily in a sequence. A multiplicity of initiatives converging and supporting the peace effect will be on our radar screen. I refer to the need for a cultural shift, a behavioral change. Life is a continual negotiation process, sometimes to overcome enemies, win friends, forge alliances, promote businesses. We can resolve and anticipate conflict only if we find a common interest, a common ground, conciliating among differences. Gradual tension reduction and reciprocation, jointly with genuine efforts to restore confidence, are our way back to safety. In this effort, realism and idealism should coexist to preserve human security for all. With these words, I would like to turn the floor to the first of our distinguished speakers. I would like to ask the president of the Alma Mater European University, Rector Ludwig Toplak, from Maribor, Slovenia, to come in, and he has a very important announcement for us with regard to the global institute that we're going to create for research and for peace facilitation, an institute that Ludwig and jointly with us is setting up. Ludwig, please, your turn.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the World Academy of Art and Science for the trust and opportunity to present the mission, vision, action plan of the Global Peace Offensive Center. A special thanks goes to President of World Academy of Art and Science, Garry Jacobs, and Vice President Donato Kinegar, and as well President of European Academy of Sciences and Arts, Professor Klaus Mainzer. Based on the prior discussion and a consensus has been reached between World Academy of Art and Science, European Academy of Sciences and Arts, and Alma Mater European University to jointly establish the Global Peace Offensive Center as an independent research institution. The mission of the center is grounded on two key documents: Vision for Global Peace Offensive since October 24, and the Global Peace Offensive Calls for Action since March 25. The first document, recognizing the growing threats to global peace, highlights the responsibility of scientists and artists and reaffirms our collective commitment to unite scientists, artists, universities, cultural institutions, policymakers, opinion leaders, spiritual figures, and media in joint effort to preserve peace and ensure sustainable development. The second document is more action-oriented. It focuses on strategic conflicts de-escalation, the promotion of dialogue for peace, and advocacy through education, training, and political engagement for sustainable peace. It emphasizes the importance of academic and civil society initiatives within the framework of the scientific and cultural diplomacy for peace. The signatories agreed that Alma Mater Europea will assume administrative, operational, and preparatory organizational activities for the formal establishment of the Global Peace Offensive Center as an independent scientific institution. World Academy has long demonstrated its influence in promoting peace and sustainable development across various domains: cultural, scientific, and social-political. European Academy of Sciences and Arts, with a network of over 2,000 active scientists, including 37 Nobel laureates, stands as one of the most representative academic networks in the world. Alma Mater European University is a young and dynamic university operating under the auspices of European Academy and integrating the experiences of the traditional global universities and academic community. The successful practice of collaboration for founders of center was reaffirmed in March 25, when the three institutions jointly organized a major international scientific conference titled "It's About People, Social and Technological Resilience for Health, Sustainable Development." For the formal establishment and commencement of the center's operation, the founding partners have already secured the necessary resources to ensure the successful implementation of the center's program and vision. We appeal to the academic, cultural, financial, and public spheres to support the Global Peace Offensive Center in fulfilling the peace-building mission of the academic and social humanitarian institutions, including universities. The center will officially begin its operation in September 1st, 25. The registration process is currently underway. Thank you very much.
Professor Toplak, Ludwig, thank you very much for your presentation and announcement of what is for us an historical landmark. I would like to say is certainly a step forward in the conduit of our peace offensive to have a base, to have secured a base for dialogue, for research, for facilitation. It's what is needed most. So we will have a gradual approach, also geographically. We probably start from the Central European area and the Balkans, but we'll expand to different parts of the world according to opportunities and also the ability that we will have to attract institutions and individuals into the fold. The coalition has to grow, and the moment that it grows, we have so many participants today that will not have much time to tell us about what their plans are. And I regret that. But this is merely an occasion to signify the fact that organizations, that very distinguished individuals are behind this initiative, are signatory of these initiatives, and they're going to do everything possible to take off the initiative itself and expand its own activities. So I would ask, therefore, I can see him, my friend Paul Ziakovic, to come in. He is the Director of Mediation and Peace Support at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. He is an experienced diplomat, and we had the opportunity to discuss among ourselves the possible application of our framework, our distinctive framework for action in many critical situations. Paul, the floor is yours. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donato. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you to the World Academy of Art and Science for inviting me to this important discussion. My name is Paul Ziaatkowiec, and I come from the field of conflict mediation, as do my observations today. So in these few minutes, I wanted to focus on just 3 or 4 key lessons from what I've experienced in the mediation setting. The first thing is to set the context and echo what some of what Donato was already saying, that we're living through a time of considerable upheaval in the international system. It's a time when not only basic international principles and the rule of law are being challenged, but the nature of international relations is changing, as is the nature of conflict. Therefore, we're faced with the need to adapt the tools and methods that we use to address conflict. And that's where new thinking and new frameworks, such as the peace offensive, can be so valuable, particularly in addressing some of the gaps in the traditional peacemaking methodology. So in my view, mediation is part art and part science. It certainly requires creativity and flexibility, but it also needs frameworks and strategy. And the peace offensive gives us an important outline in that regard. My first observation is that mediators tend to overly focus on a couple of thematic categories where solutions are expected to be found, namely politics and security. There's often a tendency to look for a way out of a conflict through finding a formula that defines an agreeable balance of power or decision-making and getting the fighting to stop through such mechanisms as ceasefires, buffer zones, security guarantees, disarmament, demobilization, and such. But there's a lot more to it in most cases. Usually, for peace to really take hold, there are deeper grievances in the affected communities to deal with. A diverse array of fears, needs, perceptions, and misperceptions, and the imperatives of a more broadly defined human security that all need to be properly understood and processed for conflict resolution to be effective and sustainable. And of course, that means listening to all those stakeholders or constituencies that are affected by the conflict. It's one thing to dialogue with political leaders and armed groups, and that can bring an end to the fighting, at least temporarily. But for a positive peace to emerge, it's been shown through empirical studies that more inclusive processes lead to more durable peace agreements. So we need to look at who else should have a voice in peace processes. The vulnerable groups, the affected communities, those who can influence whether grievances are addressed or they're allowed to linger. So another observation I would share from engaging in a number of these processes is that other actors, besides the politicians and the fighters, often bring a deeper understanding of the conflict and indeed better ideas for getting out of it. Thus, involving them in the dialogue process itself increases the likelihood of a peace that takes root. What often goes unnoticed is the pivotal role that civil society can play, not only in helping the mediator to gain a more holistic understanding of conflict dynamics, but also in rallying support, finding convergence between opposing groups, and devising measures to rebuild trust. So coming back to the peace offensive, what really resonates with me is its call for a more inclusive and a more multidisciplinary approach. On multidisciplinarity, apart from the security and the political domains, there are other disciplines from where good ideas can emerge. One of them is the academic and scientific community. In a number of dialogue processes that I've been involved in, I've found that science diplomacy can create the most viable entry points for dialogue. There's nothing like irrefutable facts and shared threats to build convergence between conflict parties and to promote joint efforts to address shared problems. For example, by managing shared waterways or other resources, or mitigating the local effects of environmental degradation or climate change as examples. Another discipline worth including is business. I've noticed over the years that the room where mediation processes take place is often filled with political and security actors. But it's surprising how peace talks rarely include economic actors. They're either sidelined, ignored, or don't proactively push for a role in peace talks. But business can bring a number of important elements to peace processes: access to decision makers, the know-how to build tangible economic prospects, tools for reconstruction and rehabilitation of livelihoods, and influence over local communities. Sometimes also visionary ideas for the post-conflict future. So it's a constituency that is worth listening to. So these are just a couple of examples of why we need a more expansive and multidisciplinary approach to peacemaking. It's about broadening the imagination, creating entry points that we may not otherwise see, and therefore expanding the potential for trust building and for solutions. And it all traces back to two of the basic ingredients of the peace offensive: expanding the peacemaking community and making peacemaking more human-centric. There's much more to be said about the critical role of youth, women, marginalized groups, the importance of effective communication, local networks, and social movements, and also the power of new technology as a tool for peacemaking. All of these are key ingredients in the framework of the peace offensive. But because I've just about filled my time, I hope that another speaker will take up these themes. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much for your intervention, Paul. And you filled perfectly your time, and actually you helped with the sequence that we can now reappropriate ourselves of. Go back to Klaus Meissner, that is with us. Klaus is the president of the European Academy of Art and Science and one of the founding members of the Peace Offensive initiative and also of the project that we will conduct together. Klaus, I understand you are with us now. Would you take the floor for 5 minutes, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, dear members of the World and the European Academy of Sciences and Arts. In recognition of our common commitment of the two academies to the principles of peace offensive, I want to confirm our common intention of cultural and scientific diplomacy for peace building in Europe and the world. Europe, with its diversity, lacks an overall strategy. This makes such an initiative all the more important, at least at the scientific and artistic level. But scientific academies are not political organizations that can act alongside or even compete with political states. States work with experienced professional diplomats to represent the interests of their countries. Moreover, we have neither the political legitimacy nor the power to enforce our findings. On the other hand, it is also not enough to simply call for peace with moral appeals and remain in the ivory tower. So, what concrete contribution can we, as scientific academies, make to peace? Ever since the atomic bomb was built, we have known that scientists also have a responsibility for what they do. Albert Einstein was motivated by this when he founded the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. Based on their expertise, natural scientists can, for example, explain the consequences of climate change. Computer scientists can explain the possibilities, limits, and dangers of AI. And historians can demonstrate how wars and conflicts have arisen in the past. Social and political scientists can use this historical experience to develop de-escalation strategies for conflicts. However, it is also true that wars follow a complex dynamics that must be studied in detail. We live in an age of asymmetric wars, which rely on limited conflicts and wearing down the opponent's forces in order to assert their own interests in the long term. Any hesitation is interpreted by our opponents as weakness and immediately exploited. The ancient Romans, who established a world empire over centuries and were able to facilitate long periods of peace, made the well-known claim, vis pacem para bellum, whoever wants peace must prepare for war. Those who fail to recognize this end up creating instability and provoking armed conflicts. Analyzing such political and military strategies is one of the tasks of scientific think tanks, which can act in an advisory capacity in politics. This undoubtedly includes scientific expertise in social, economic, political, and military science, which can be gathered in the classes of scientific academies. Beyond that, however, we can all contribute to peace as scientists and artists. We can specifically seek cooperation in our disciplines across all political and ideological boundaries. We can work on specific scientific projects in our disciplines and contribute to solving specific problems. Those who work together on common goals do not shoot at each other. Working together fosters mutual trust and promotes solidarity. As an example, I would like to mention the major research centers such as CERN, International Elementary Particle Accelerator, ITER, International Fusion Reactor, and the International Space Station. During the Cold War, there was the Leopoldina, the German National Academy of Sciences, as the last bracket in a divided Germany. I assume in the future, major scientific tasks will lead to further international science centers if they involve tasks for humanity that cannot be solved by individual national states. I therefore once again call an all-over scientific cooperation across all political and ideological boundaries in disciplinary or interdisciplinary projects. We should not be naive and recognize the risks and dangers of this kind of cooperation. But we should also remember that we are all one humanity, with only this one planet Earth as our home. As scientists and artists, let us use science and art as a means of diplomacy through our concrete work together. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Klaus. Thanks a lot. I would like to ask, first of all, Carlos Alvarez, who's now with us, Carlos Alvarez-Pereira, the Secretary General of the Club of Rome, to come in briefly, 4 minutes, Carlos, and then followed immediately after by Jonathan Granoff, President of the Global Security Institute and WAAS Trustee. Please, Carlos first.
Thank you, Donato. Thank you, WAAS, for organizing the session. I'm very happy to share some ideas from the perspective of the Club of Rome, who started in 1 year ago our own planetary peace initiative, and we are working closely with our friends and colleagues. I mean, there are plenty of people who are at the same time members of WAAS and members of the Club of Rome, so it's a real pleasure. We are in family, also working on the peace offensive that Donato is leading. Just want to say a few things because I know the time is limited. One is, what do we understand by, when we talk about planetary peace, what do we understand by that? What I'm going to say is not written in stone. It's just a first attempt at a description, of planetary peace as a state of affairs in which the concept of enemy is abolished and the aspiration to hegemony over others, humans and nature alike, is also abandoned for the sake of peaceful collaboration and emulation aimed at addressing the existential challenges of humanity and bringing about equitable well-being for all on a healthy planet. It's a bit long, but it means that we have two very important elements here to consider. One is that we are also at war with nature, as famously said by Antonio Guterres some years ago, destroying the ecosystems on which our lives depend. And we have to shift from our from the extractive industrialized extraction or extractive industrialization to a process of regeneration of the ecosystems, again, on which our lives depend. Making peace with nature, but this making peace with nature is actually not different from making peace with ourselves and among ourselves, among humans. So the second element is to address the imbalances of power, the system of international relations we still live in was born as an outcome of World War II, at a time when it was largely the design and the consecration for the victors, the countries who had come out of World War II as the victorious countries, in a world, by the way, where there were plenty of countries that now we consider as independent, but were still colonies. So in the DNA of the international relations we still have, there is this imbalance of power, which is no longer valid, does not match at all with the reality, with the fact that the West, the world has escaped from the Western dominance. And even I would say the West has escaped from itself by breaking with the rules of the multilateral system and showing once and again that when we talk about universality and universal values, but once and again, when we have to choose between our values and our interests, we choose our interests. So there is a lot of work to do in rebuilding or building something else that we call pluriversality, plurality of pathways towards regenerative well-being on a healthy planet, respecting all worldviews, cultures, traditions, and histories. And we will work on that together with WAAS, focusing our own action on 3 pillars: the role of youth and intergenerational leadership, how the exchanges between young and not so young generations can contribute to move the lines; the role of science, and not only scientific diplomacy, but how do we get the agenda of science out of war; and the role of business, because we think we need to involve all sectors in this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. Jonathan, please use only 3 minutes.
Thank you. I want to just go right to the vision, the statement in the vision. It's that the peace offensive seeks to mobilize research, art, media, opinion makers, religious leaders, educational and civil society institutions to identify practical measures to reverse the direction and reduce the intensity of confrontation by a global peace offensive focusing on incremental reciprocal steps for conflict resolution, emphasizing cultural, scientific, economic, educational, environmental diplomacy, as well as political, economic, and media systems. I would say that it is not just, we're not coming together just to identify practical, we are coming together to identify and bring into realization measures to reverse the war amongst nations and the war on the environment. So it's not just an academic endeavor, it's an endeavor that will stimulate activism in these various communities. There's a long history of movements originating in civil society that have helped the world and changed the practice of states. The human rights movement, the labor movement, the women's rights movement, the environmental movement, the peace movements of the world, none of them have been initiated by states, without exception. They've all been initiated by individuals taking moral agency and promoting values that advance our common humanity. Today, the nations of the world are reverting away from the multilateral cooperative security dynamic that we so aptly advance in the World Academy of Art and Science, human security. And we're seeing a regression into almost a feudal mentality of states defining their self-interest above the most necessary, practical, reasonable approach to addressing the existential threats of destroying the regenerative processes of nature and brandishing and threatening to use nuclear weapons. There is a pressing need to be a stimulant, a validator, to create a platform, and inspire many communities that are filled with people with a cosmopolitan sense of the unity of the human family and the absurdity of using science, technology, and sophisticated social organizations that we have for conflict and the pursuit of power over others. There is no way that we can change the destruction of the oceans, the destruction of the climate, the destruction of the rainforests, the growing inequities of wealth distribution, the absurd ever-expanding budgets for militarism, without a perspective that puts our common humanity first. This initiative is necessary, it is practical, and it is timely. It is a privilege to be able to be part of it. And I just want to go back and just give a few examples, and I will stay very much within our time frame. But during the Cold War, I was involved in a civil society initiative of a professional organization of Lawyers Alliance for World Security, when we brought lawyers from the then Soviet Union to the United States and took them to see jury trials, and bankruptcy court amazed them, and met judges who were actually holding the state in contempt of court and fining the state. And they were amazed at the idea that a judge could apply the law to the state, and sending lawyers en masse to the then Soviet Union, who saw that there were human beings there, not people to be demonized. Those people were necessary to help us get out of the Cold War peacefully. I want to give an example of where we are, where we're starting. Oxford University has a chair in the history of war. It doesn't have a chair in peace studies. That says it all. There are museums for war all over the world extolling the heroes of war. There are no major peace museums. So we have a task before us. The two major institutions affecting our world today at a global level are the nation state, which was set up in the 17th century to separate Protestants and Catholics, not to bring people together. Our task today is to bring people together. The other dynamic is the market, which is intrinsically competitive. Our task is to weave and build bridges that are realistic and capable of preventing the downward spiral of the war against the environment and the war amongst nations. Thank you.
Jonathan, thanks a lot for your support and for your additional points that you have raised. They're all very interesting. I would like now, if you allow me, to show if it's ready, if the technical support is ready, to show a brief statement by the former president and honorary president of the World Academy, Professor Ivo Schlaus.
When Nobel laureates met in Oslo, they said that the future of each one of us depends actually on the welfare of everyone, implying, of course, that everyone is secure. So what is essential? It is essential, of course, that we secure peace in all parts of the world. Unfortunately, now the situation is much, much worse than it was actually in 2015 because of the war in Ukraine, the aggression, and all of the consequences that are there developing. The second aspect, of course, is that the human and the natural capital are very quickly deteriorated, and according to all studies, among them also Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, shows that we have a window of opportunity which is very limited, barely decade and a half, possibly 2. And it is necessary to act so to change the natural policy paradigm and to change the human policy paradigm. Now, of course, as we already pointed out quite some time ago in the World Academy of Art and Science, but also in Club of Rome chapters both in Slovenia and in Croatia, the development of science and the development of technology develops very, very fast. Science actually doubles the knowledge, scientific knowledge, doubles essentially between 5 and 10 years. And technological progress, we have a famous Moore law of 2 years doubling. And of course, it is going even faster. And of course, this is precisely what we have now when we are faced with really new technologies like the artificial intelligence, more generally also sometimes called artificial general intelligence. And in addition to that, robotics, synthetic biology, and so on. These developments, of course, can be a great benefit to humankind, but also, if we do not understand them well, they can be really destructive. And it is precisely along these lines that it is necessary for all of us, specifically for the World Academy, for the Club of Rome, to focus on really making all of these developing, emerging new technologies beneficial. And of course, this implies constant increase in the knowledge that we have, emphasis on scientific and technological research. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. And now I think we have concluded the initial statements, and we have breakout rooms sessions. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask really 2 minutes to each with not with record. I will start with Jonathan.
My impressions, my thoughts and reflections are: 1, there is a tremendous need to get the intelligentsia of the world to focus on solutions of the 2 major pressing problems that we have, the war on the environment and the war among states. There are disciplines, methods, skills that can be taught, skills of personal, as David Weinberg pointed out, different levels of skills and examples of how peace education can take place in schools, of how businesses actually create rules of engagement, rules of competition, so that they don't end up with self-help and that they operate with legal adjudication of disputes. There's ways in which countries have found in regions of working together. There's skills that can be taught. And so there's a real need for us to amplify all of the voices that want to use technology, that want to use media, that want to use our political institutions, and help create a culture of peace. It's just that simple. And I just want to finish with a thought of an experience of my own. I had the privilege several years ago of being asked to advise a civic chamber of part of a parliament of a major country, which licenses civil society institutions to do almost anything. In that country, if you want to have a bowling league or a political party, the state has to certify you. So they asked me, how do you ensure in the United States, which has a robust civil society, which is definitely under challenge, as are the independence of our academic institutions and everything, how do you ensure that civil society is a benefit to the security of the state? And I thought about it and I said, I have no idea. I have no idea. I could tell you how we ensure the state is a benefit to civil society. In your equation, the state is the employer and the people are the employee. for a healthy society, the state must be the employee and the people are the employer. And the duty of intellectuals is to give the skills and information for the people to be able to be effective employers of the state.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Thanks for everybody who contributed to your panel. Carlos, do you have a word to say, or you pass the floor? You have a word.
I have 3 words. One is that we live in dangerous times, but the criticality of this situation is also what opens the space of possibilities for change, because it makes people become awake of the danger. Second, there are plenty of examples around, not so visible, of regenerative communities, regenerative practices who are at peace among humans and with nature. We have to look at that. And third, these initiatives is very much welcome. The whole thing finished with the call to action together, and on making a highlight on the role of the collaboration between our organizations and the role of individuals in pushing for these, peacefully pushing for this offensive. Thank you.
Very well. We'll push together. And number 3 is Mila. Mila, thank you. 2 words. Thank you.
2 words.
3.
Peace. Let there be peace. There's more than 2 words, but this actually might be the right start. One of our 7 speakers, or 8 together of us, a collective of 8, Arthur said something very powerful, that peace is indivisible. And this is what we need to think of. We started with, I'll be brief and bring out the key points. We started out with the understanding that all military, all politics, governments, or governance, science, and technology are human. That is a difficulty that we have to deal with in how to approach and mobilize and educate, emancipate humans towards peace. But it is also a very hopeful introduction point that we need to be aware of in the process of emancipating state, society, and science together, and to protect soil, soul, and social bonds together in correlation. So I will just point out a couple of points that we do indeed need. We have all basically confirmed that we need a meta framework to which we can all adhere, ascribe to, and promote, such as human security, encompassing the SDGs, but really actually making it a meta framework which would be peace through and through, as an indivisible right, I would say. That we need to educate parliamentarians as the key position players between citizenry and government, that we need to use arts and culture not only to communicate these values, but also as a reflection of the true state of affairs in the world and connector between the sentiments and the social force of the people that needs to be communicated to the masses and ultimately to the political players. That science also needs to be in so many ways indivisible, that it needs to be listened to, but it also, I would add here, needs to be demilitarized through a process of science solidarity that we didn't mention, but I'm deriving that from everything that was shared. We need to be working across divides that were not paid attention to, such as geo divide, South and North, power divide, US versus the rest of the world, as well as philosophical divide between evidence-based decision-making and politicians. So emancipation of politicians and education is key, in conjunction with people through creating a certain culture. We all agreed, finally, that the multilateralism and multidimensional and multilateral diplomacies are key. Alliances of this scope are key. I have heard that WAAS could be one of those places, conveners, and that the futures certainly need to be our commons into which every voice needs to be introduced, and no decision-making place, including World Academy, can be cut off from resourceful perspectives that variety of ethnical, ethical, scientific, artistic, political perspectives bring to the racial and other perspectives bring to the table. So inclusivity, diversity, and equity ultimately are key for the peace that is indivisible.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mila. And now the floor to Alexander.
Thank you very much, Donato. Ladies and gentlemen, there are really so many opportunities and so many challenges, so we focused on solutions. Paul DZIATKOWIEC presented some high-level moderation examples that are really useful. Then Charlotte Arnemark and Elena Mustakova presented methodologies like intersectional collective spaces for communication that change like tensions into peace. Our young associate fellow Dina presented excellent examples of youth leadership, and also it was interesting in her observation that narratives of war and cultural hatred actually linger long after the war, so you need to do something, and they developed actually an app technology where voices of people can be heard and convert this trend. And then last but not least, our Prince Nikola Petrovich Njegoš, who is focusing on art. He presented some great ideas like Stone for Peace, where everybody like brings a stone to Cetinje. That was in '91, but now we can repeat as there are new wars. And also like peace cafes. And he concluded that while in economics we are competitors, in ecology we are all brothers. So the joint theme of this session was that everybody was passionate, committed to eliminate suffering, end killing, stop all wars now, like our Honorary President Ivo Schlaus wants to do. It's not time to tell you everything, but it's time to challenge everybody, either a scientist or an artist, join our efforts to make a lasting change for the better. And if peace offensive ideas resonate with you, join us. Just let us know. So our curiosity, creativity, compassion, and commitment awaken the best in everyone, and we build a peaceful, sustainable knowledge civilization worthy of the 21st century together. We join Einstein and Russell in pledge to remember our humanity and forget the rest. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you very much to everyone. What we can say is that as we build our institute that Ludwig Topolak has spoken about, that will be on its feet as of September, we will regather in separate groups because we are too many and the community is growing, but this collective wisdom will be used. I promise you that it will be used and it will be factored in all our activities from now on. So you are not just testimonials, you are really the actors, the front players, or I would say really the advance forces of the peace offensive itself. So our regiment, battalion, or whatever it is right now is growing. We have to, of course, bring many other people around this exercise, this collective project. And we will do so. So I'm very satisfied about that. Now, a final word is now with Garry. Garry, I hope, since we don't have time, that we not go beyond it, but that you promise to capture the essence of our discussion in the conclusions of the conference. Garry, to you.
It would take a miracle to capture those essences here, but I think we can very much capture this in part as a central message of the conference and the central message of the project on global turbulence, because it's clear that peace and stability and security are the absolute foundation on which any effort to build and achieve what we have to in the next generation for the world is peace is the foundation. And I think it was Mila who said, human security, the security we're working for, the real security is security for human beings. And it's time, and I heard from some very perceptive comments in the four groups as I went around, the recognition that this is the time. This is the time for the peace offensive, and this is the time to mobilize people, human beings, and not just rely on the governments who have had the responsibility for security of borders, but on the human beings who are all of us who are affected by the absence of peace in the world. This is the time for us to mobilize it. And I thank you, Donato, for the inspiration of starting this initiative, and all the partners who have already joined and all of you who have participated. And I thank all the partners for all the encouragement and support, and we need to do, this is only the beginning. We have 8 more sessions in the conference today, and a lot of distinguished speakers and people who are anxious to share issues that are directly connected with what we're talking about here. This is the foundation for it, but we need not only to achieve this, we need to find the strategies that are going to build this security in many different ways, and that's the subject of the whole conference. Thank you very much for joining us.